Do you work for the Catholic Church? Are you wondering how to hire your next great employee or stop the bleeding from high turnover rates? Well, this is the podcast for you.
Welcome to Serious Catholic Leadership, the place where you can come for clear answers and straightforward advice on all topics related to working for the Catholic Church. No fluff stuff. We are your hosts, Zach Morgan and Tom Timmons, and joining us in studio today is Tom Pagano from Mission Advantage Recruiting. Tom, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Zach and Tom. Good to be here.
Churches and nonprofits do a lot of things well. But effective, efficient hiring policies are not always on that list. Oftentimes, hiring for a replacement feels like a rush job, or there isn't a clear understanding of the totality of responsibilities for a vacant role. And it makes the process of finding good candidates very difficult. It seems our favorite line to put in a job description often is duties as assigned by Father, or by the CEO, or by the board, which we see as sort of a workaround for poorly defined job descriptions. But ultimately, these practices leave the institution and often the new hire feeling very frustrated. Wouldn't you agree, Tom?
Yeah, absolutely, Zach. I think you said that well. What's interesting is the recruiting industry in the private sector is about $150 billion. So it's this massive industry, right? As Jim Collins says, the kind of that famous adage, it's all about having the right people on the bus in business. And when we look at the church world or the nonprofit world, and of course there's differences in resources and staff and different capabilities. But there's certainly not that same ability, effort, energy, investment into, I think, finding and hiring the right people. And through my career, kind of working for various nonprofits, hiring would often become, who do you know, or you post a job and see what applications come in, which could work, but a more robust process to find the right people, to screen the right people often yields, results for years and years to come, whether it's dollars or mission or, whatever, measure you have. So that's what Mission Advantage is seeking to do, to kind of provide these recruitment services to Catholic nonprofits to help them just spend the effort and energy needed to find and screen the right talent, and hopefully advancing their mission by having the right people on the bus.
Well, and you guys have sort of defined your tactic or your process for helping out people when they come to you and they say, hey, we want you to help us hire for this position, or when a potential hire comes and says, hey, can you promote my resume for me? And the number one thing it seems you focus on first is needs assessment, and then you go from there. But can you really speak to the necessity of the institution and the individual in being really open and honest during that needs assessment part, and the totality of what they should be sharing with you guys or another organization that helps with that hiring process?
Yeah, absolutely. So, every organization is so unique. When you look at the mission of the organization, you look at the leadership, the culture, the team, what they expect, from their staff, what the communication style is like, how many hours a week you're working, just all of that. Every situation is so unique. My wife and I we're currently looking for a house out here in New Jersey, which is a tough time to be house hunting. But our realtor, and thank God we have a great realtor. I mean, she knows our family. She knows the type of neighborhood that we like to be in, the type of town we want to be in, the types of areas, the school we want our kids to be in. Because she took the time to really understand our needs, as a family, and is showing us houses accordingly. There's tons of houses on the market. She could just be sending us listings or trying to, find that transaction. But understanding our family, our needs first, has helped the process, go much more smoothly. Though we haven't found the right house yet, but I think we're getting there. So it's the same thing with hiring. Taking that time to really understand the team, the leadership, who works well there, what technical skill sets you need, what are the unique cultural elements of the team. it's going to provide, a much more successful search and, meaningful work situation for the candidate, for the organization, and everyone involved. So yeah, that needs assessment is in many ways the most important, aspect of what we do.
That's great and great insight with the real estate connection. That's really helps make it very clear. Now, when you're trying to help an organization find the right candidate, I think a lot of times organizations probably are up against the gun. Someone's just left,
Yeah.
transitioned. Maybe they're expanding, bringing on a new role. So, how do you balance finding the right candidate with meeting a deadline? And are there any sort of ways that you can help an organization not just jump and hire the very first person that
Right.
comes across their table?
Yeah, it's a great question, Tom. We often ask, as part of that needs assessment is, when when do you need this role filled by? And then the answer is always either tomorrow or yesterday. It's people are often just up against it when they're looking for talent or ready to launch a search. And while that is an element of it, you will find in most situations, teams, organizations, they're not bleeding out, with vacancies. You can kind of find the resources, some staff, overlapping or maybe some, kind of contract fillers to help with those areas while you conduct a search. And that's certainly what we encourage, while there is that pressure, because there's that open seat and those tasks that aren't being done. A new hire is too important, and the risks of the wrong hire are so detrimental. So taking a deep breath, kind of giving yourself that allotted time to be able to, run, a thorough search, assess them carefully, making sure it is the right fit for all parties. Because you don't want to get that wrong, especially, if you think you're under the gun now, if you hire the wrong person, it's just going to be doubling those pain points.
Well, and on the other side of that coin, oftentimes the institution has such a rigorous interview process that you kind of
Right.
get burnout. I've had quite a few directees who, during their time that I was working with them, ended up losing their job or quitting and then looking for another. And I saw many of them come from spiritual direction session to session, becoming more and more disgruntled and sharing the frustration of, I'm on my 8th interview for the same job, or the best one is when people end up not getting the job and they get this email saying, please take an evaluation of how we did in our hiring process. So do you mind speaking to that as well as an institutional expectation of finding the best candidate, but also really respecting people's time?
Yeah, that's a great point, Zach. And I think, um, like anything else in life, I think, an example that we might all be, familiar with is homilies at mass, right? I think sometimes I know the Dominicans talk about this, the order of preachers, that, it's easier to give, a 20-minute homily because you just kind of ramble and talk about all these things. But, if you do the preparation up front, you can kind of be concise and deliver a message and be really effective in that way. Probably similar with an interview process, right? We often encourage clients 3 interviews should be the max, right around there. Anything more, you're really flirting with just the process becoming too laborious, not a great candidate experience, and just taking too much time. In this talent market too, it's so talent driven. I mean, there's way more job openings than there are people and good talent ready to fill them. So you really have to think about what is that candidate's experience. So in 3 interviews, you should be able to have all the right stakeholders, meet that person, get through all the material, all the questions, all the assessment that you need, in that process, and then just make a decision within a timely manner. Provides a really great candidate experience. And again, we'll take some preparation up front, but it just makes everything, I think much more effective if it's done that way.
Right. No. And as you said earlier, every organization is completely different. But at the same time, how important is, I mean, obviously bringing the right skill set to the job is essential, but at the same time, how important is it that someone is trainable? In my estimation, there isn't going to be ever really the perfect candidate for the perfect job, unless maybe they've worked that exact same job before.
Right.
But how important is it then to can also convey to the organizations, that healthy balance of, okay, this candidate has great expertise, but he's also smart and trainable, and can learn on the job.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's the $1 million question, right? And I think for some positions that are technical, if you're looking to hire a software engineer or whatever it is, I mean, you need that technical capability. But for a lot of jobs, kind of in the church or in the nonprofit setting, a lot of fundraising development jobs, which we've spoken about, there is room, I think, for just the right natural skill set or transferable skills, and then combined with some training on the job to be very successful and up and running. Pat Lencioni talks about being humble, hungry, and smart. So I think there certainly are a lot of things kind of in the soft skills space that can make someone successful, in many jobs, as opposed to having, a specific technical background in that area. So, other, leadership, positions held within, professional organizations or volunteer organizations, student organizations in college, a track record of success, in something, maybe it's a side gig that they successfully ran. Maybe it's, a podcast, or, they were the captain of the golf team for 4 years in college, whatever it is, but something that shows that you can be resilient and committed and have leadership skills. So there's a lot of areas, I think, outside of having the same job previously that can lead to, a successful hire.
Well, and to brag on Mission Advantage a little bit, you guys seem to do your job very well. 94% of your placements 2 years later are still in the jobs you placed them in. I mean, that's a huge number to be able to brag. So kudos. But can you tell us then? You've obviously had experience, probably a gamut of experience with different organizations. What you don't necessarily have to give who the organization is, but could you tell us sort of what your favorite out of all of them, what has been your favorite organization to work with, but why? More so why than who? What has made the relationship so great?
Sure, sure. Um, Yeah, absolutely. So I can use an example, and I think it'd be okay if I shared the name, but Mary's Meals USA. So they're an affiliation of Mary's Meals International. So a wonderful, wonderful nonprofit in the food security space that provides millions of meals to children in the third world in their place of education. So their US team, they're about a 15-person staff, and we've been working with them for a few years now, on a variety of roles. So I think what makes them special, I mean, their mission is beautiful and resonates, but they've really owned the fact that they're going to hire, very carefully and be very intentional about their hiring. So they brought us into that process and have made Mission Advantage sort of their recruiting arm. And we spent a lot of time really understanding, their mission, their team, their culture, who works well there, and going back to the needs assessment that we've talked about, and have taken that understanding out to the marketplace and filled, probably 7 or 8 roles, over the past 2 years with them. So that partnership approach just has been incredible. They've really welcomed us onto their team, kind of as a branch of who they are and what they do, and kind of let us in on that so that we could go and find people with that, very, very tight, cultural alignment, people who are passionate about what they're doing specifically. And it's just been just such a wonderful partnership. So, I think what makes them special, I mean, their team, their culture, is beautiful, the mission that they're doing, but them really being so intentional about recruiting, and kind of welcoming us into that, has made just a great partnership, and has provided a lot of successful hires that are impacting their organization in a big way.
Fantastic. Yeah, they are a fantastic organization, and I always admire the work that they do and how much they're able to accomplish with such a small staff, very resourcefully. And really, I think they're a great example for a lot of nonprofits. When I think of other nonprofits, I often myself compare to Mary's Meals
Yeah.
as like the gold standard, right? So great work collaborating with them. But then, I think when we think about, the right hire, the person's, joined a team, then there's this whole, I know Zach and I have talked about in the past that, the initial kind of maybe infatuation with a new organization has kind of faded a little bit.
Yeah.
And, what do we do and how do we prevent the turnover that we find so often
Yeah.
in so many nonprofits?
Yeah, it's a great point, Tom. And anyone who's kind of worked in the nonprofit space or the church space, you see that. You see the turnover. AFP, the Association of Fundraising Professionals, recently put out a stat that of frontline fundraisers, the average tenure within the organization is a year and a half, about 18 months. And anyone working in fundraising, I mean, it's hard to be successful in that time frame. But we see this so often in nonprofits and in the church, and it can be detrimental. So I think, like we've been talking about, a lot of it is the upfront investment in recruiting carefully and hiring carefully. But then, once the person is in place, a lot of it is what you, how you kind of create that environment, that position, their ability to be successful there. So there were 3 points, in preparation for this that I put down that I think anecdotally, we're hearing a lot of when we're talking to candidates, people looking for new jobs, people looking for their next move. What are the things that are consistently frustrating, good talent, in the nonprofit space, and what they're, I guess, what would help them stay, in their current job and keep them retained. So it boils down to 3 main points, I think, that we hear a lot that would help nonprofits retain, talent. I think specifically fundraising talent. The first one, I think, is people want to win. You know, uh, so much of our professional life, we think of the salary number, we think of how much money you can make. That is a part of it, of course, but I think people also want to be successful. They want to know what are the expectations of me? How can I be good at my job? How can my leadership be proud of me? How can my organization be happy with what I'm doing? And am I matching up to that? Right? There's so many fundraising positions. You hear about them all the time. I think some of us have probably been in them where you get hired and it's just go raise a bunch of money. And it's such a difficult model to be successful and to love what you're doing because you don't know, am I adding up? Am I providing value? Is the organization, pleased with my performance? So people want to win and they want to know that they're doing what's expected. And I think this can be boiled down, in a pretty micro level, by, KPIs, by metrics, and by, setting those reasonable goals. So you give people the opportunity, for small wins, for consistent wins, so that they know they're doing the right thing and they're performing, even before or, hopefully simultaneously with dollars raised or whatever the ultimate big picture success is in that role.
Yeah, great point. And as you know, I mean, I've spent 15 years in the nonprofit development sector, fundraising, and that speaks a lot of truth to me. And I think for myself personally, one of the most frustrating things that I've found time and time again is that you know you work so hard to meet your goals, and exceed your goals, and then January 1st rolls around, and it's like you've done nothing,
Yeah,
because no
start all
matter
over.
what you've done, what goals you've reached and exceeded, and 120, 200% over goal, January 1st rolls around, and it's like, oh, you're at zero again. And there isn't that distinction of let's pause, let's celebrate, let's like you said, break it down into the small
Sure.
achievable goals. And I know, yeah, that was always just so difficult because, in some sense, even internally, I would often, end of year is a great time to fundraise, but a lot of times I'd be like, wait, if I push too hard,
Right.
then it's going to make my,
Right.
2023 that much harder. So it's a real challenge, and I think having that appreciation for successful fundraising or for whatever you're doing in the church, I think is so key to maintaining those hires.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just common for, a lot of these small organizations to hire their first director of development or hire their first gift officer or a gift officer in a new region. And you just set a big goal. Maybe it's, $500,000 for the first year, and maybe that could happen, but I find if you make that more reasonable, like what would be a great first year where the organization, is obviously bringing more money into the mission than they're spending on this new employee, but giving everyone the opportunity to have a quick win in that year one, and then hopefully year two that grows and grows and grows a little bit. But I think having clear goals that are achievable, it just changes the whole experience for an employee and for someone who hopefully is driven to be successful and to to build and to grow and to provide value.
Yeah, and a lot of times we set goals as an institution, but we forget that as especially managers and leaders, and father CEOs, boards set goals for individuals too. And
Right.
we think of like, okay, we've got a big institutional goal, but like you said, if you really take the time to examine the position that you're hiring for, and part of the onboarding process be an achievable expectations in that first year, it creates such a more robust experience for the new person coming in to feel like they are gaining ground instead of just spinning their wheels. Because especially in development, it's easy to go in and feel like you're on the phone or you're and you spin your wheels because you don't see anything immediate, because you're still building relationships, and relationships are what bring in real contribution. And we can't expect people to walk in. We can't expect them to start at the finish line. And we can't set expectations that make them feel like they're limping toward the finish line. And I think that what you just said kind of really speaks to that of having achievable expectations, especially in that first year, because they have to create those meaningful relationships with people, and they're starting most of the time at ground zero.
Exactly. Yeah, I was listening to a podcast lately. I forget which one it was, but the presenter was a sales executive and talking about how, in his space, years 3 and 4 are when producers really explode. That's really when the success, starts to pour in. And 1 and 2 are kind of building years. And you look at that previous number that we just shared about turnover in the nonprofit world at 18 months. You don't even get to that third year. So as organizations, how can we create these positions, create the expectations, so that good talent will want to stay to year 3 and year 4 and year 5, because that's when the returns really come in. Fundraising is about relationships, and it's hard to build a relationship much quicker than that 18 months. So you're just starting to get to a point where you can really make an impact, and unfortunately, that's when people are looking for the door.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of times I think donors also get frustrated
Hmm.
with a high turnover. I know working different jobs and starting up and calling up, major donors, and they're like, "Who are you?"
Right.
Like, I've done this before.
Right.
What? Yeah, I've talked to this person and this person and this person. They're not there anymore. And so it's hard because when donors are investing their dollars into an organization, they believe in it, they trust it, and then there isn't this, reciprocation of, really growing the relationship when there's a revolving door every year to 2 years. And I know for myself, even organizations I've worked for 10 years ago, I still keep in touch with some of the donors of those
Right. Sure.
organizations just because I have a relationship, not because I'm, trying to solicit them for other things, but because that's the point of development, that you establish a relationship. And and in some sense that's great for me and for the donor, but then for the organization, now they have to work on creating a new relationship with a new person, and foster it even more for that particular organization.
Yeah. Well, and there's a financial reality to turnover. Turnover is expensive. You spend time training, you spend time off mission so that somebody can get acclimated. And if you have a high turnover and a small staff, it is not a it's not a fiscally responsible way to behave. And when we start talking about nonprofits in the church, we're talking about God's money, not ours. And so we really have a responsibility to create work environments that are conducive to longevity of employment, because it is the most responsible way to spend God's money. So,
Yeah, absolutely, Zach. And I think Gallup, the stat that they put out is replacing an employee usually costs 150% of their salary. So just all the lost revenue that comes from it, plus all the resources that are going to go into recruiting new people, hiring new people, the lapsed time in between. That's the number that they put out there. So, I mean, there is a dollar amount. It's costly to always be losing people.
yeah. Well, Tom, we really appreciate you coming on and talking with us. We'd like to give you a second to let us know what things that you're working on, things that Mission Advantage is working on. So if you want to take a few minutes and fill us in, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. Yeah, so the one thing I would throw out there is Mission Advantage Recruiting. We're an executive search and recruiting firm that serves primarily Catholic and faith-based nonprofits or companies. So our mission is simple. It's to connect great organizations doing important works in the church and in society with great talent that's aligned with their mission, and we hope that these missions and then their impacts will grow by having the right people there. So check out our website, www.missionadv.org. You can kind of see some of what we're doing, who we're working with, and send us a note. If you're an organization that has hiring needs, or you're looking to work in the nonprofit space, or are working in the nonprofit space and want to be made aware of new opportunities, feel free to reach out. We'd love to connect with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thanks everybody for listening. Remember to follow us on Facebook and on LinkedIn, and to support us on our Patreon page, patreon.com/Serious Catholic Leadership. Thanks everybody, and we'll see you next time.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons and share with others. Please support us on Patreon. You're listening to Serious Catholic Leadership at Sirius.fm.